Hi, and welcome to another Closer Sales webinar. Thank you so much for registering and joining us. And as always, we will get started as quickly as possible. It's now 1 o'clock, so out of respect to everybody who's turned up on time, we shall get started. So today's webinar is how to use Sales Battlecards to steal deals from competitors. What I'm just going to do is, if you have not, if you're not aware of what a Sales Battle Card is, or if you would like our template, please feel free to jump over to closers.com, klozers.com, and I've highlighted the actual link under the resources tab. If you click on the MS Word Playbook template, it is in there. Forgive me, I can't remember the page number, but it's in there. It's also in the digital playbook. So the difference is the MS Word playbook is, surprise, surprise, built in MS Word. The digital playbook is built in Microsoft OneNote. You need special licensing and permissions to use to do that, and it can be quite awkward, shall we say, to load the OneNote template. But if you can go over that, the OneNote version is much better than the Microsoft Word one, because it's a live document, and OneNote itself is a great product. And I'm not on commission, needless to say. So if you would like the template, please jump over to the website, and you're more than welcome to download that template. That's what it's going to look like. As I said, this is the Word version, and this is a playbook. If you're not familiar with a playbook, it's a single resource, a single point of reference for every salesperson to use when they join a company, so they don't have to look in different locations, different departments for the content. It's all in one place, and this is simply a template that we've put together, and I believe it's our most downloaded resource, and probably over 1,000 companies have downloaded this template already. So moving forward, before we start on the battle cards, I want to try and set some context here to try and set you up for success. Oftentimes there are things going on in the market and in the economy that we have no control over, and you certainly don't have any control over. Now, the best thing that we can do is not deny reality. So I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that there's not an issue with the big tech companies. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that there's not an issue with inflation. However, our job here is to help you deal with reality in a better way than perhaps you're maybe doing at the moment, in a different way than you're perhaps doing at the moment, and that is going to help you sell more. So I had a brief look at the registrations on this webinar, and there's companies in tech, software, telco, finance, healthcare, and oil and gas. And I can assure you that regardless of which industry you're in, this particular strategy will work for you. However, I need you to put your thinking caps on, because it's going to need a little bit of thought at your end in terms of how you're going to apply it. So if we can perhaps set the scene, so in any vertical, in any industry, you've got what I would describe as a range of companies, from new entrants into the industry right through to brand leaders. Now, new entrants, not always, but new entrants tend to charge less because they're establishing themselves. They've got no brand reputation, so they tend to charge less. But that's not always the case. But typically, new entrants to an industry are going to charge less, and they're going to grow, to maybe an SME with I don't know, short of 100 employees. Then they move to that mid-market. Then they would be what we would describe as a challenger brand, and then they would be one of the brand leaders, an enterprise organization. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that every single brand leader is the most expensive, but it's a general concept I'm trying to get over to you on the webinar here. So if you can imagine, every company in between has got some form of, they've got their pricing structure. Now, let's pretend if you are mid-market. Let's just take the mid-market one, but it applies to any sector apart from the top one, which is, it would have to be a different strategy. But for the challengers, the mid-market, SMEs and entrants, this strategy will work for you. So let's pretend you're mid-market and you charge £500. Now, that's an arbitrary figure. It could be £5,000. It doesn't matter what the figure is. It's just an example here. So let's pretend you're mid-market and you're charging £500. We know that there's issues in the tech industry. We know that there are issues with inflation, and any interruption, for want of a better word, describe as any interrupting, such as inflation, such as a recession, creates change. It creates turbulence in the market, and it creates a whole lot of change. So what happens is, and we get this, we get told this a lot from our clients, you know, well, customers are now more price sensitive. Customers are looking to save money. So if I go back to my earlier comment, you know, we're not here to deny reality. We're here to help you cope in a slightly different way with that reality. So let's pretend your customers, you're a mid-market organization, and your customers are going, wait a minute, right? Pricing is a lot more sensitive now. You need to do us a deal. You need to discount. You need to, or even worse, purchasing's on hold. So that is potentially the reality that you're facing at the moment. If you're selling into tech industry, it's not just the big players, the Meta, the Meta and the Twitter that are actually facing a downturn. A lot of the big tech companies are. So if you sell into tech, it's the same thing. It's just not necessarily being driven by inflation. So let's pretend you're mid-market, you're charging £500, and your customer base is saying, we're either needing a better price or we're not buying at all. Now, typically what happens is that we all, because we're creatures of habit, we all keep prospecting in the same pools. We keep trying to sell to the same ICPs. Now, the reality is that if your sector is facing that and you're selling into mid-market, what I would suggest is you do what we call sell up the way, because the brand leaders and the challengers, they too are looking to save money. They too are looking for efficiencies in process and purchasing. So rather than continue to try and sell into your own base, why not try and sell up the way? Now, the brand leaders who are paying £1,000, right? I'm not suggesting go to them with your £500 offer. I would actually raise your prices and you know, maybe not as much as £750, but let's just pretend £750. But I would raise your prices and go to them, right? And if the challengers are paying £750, I would raise your price to £650, £600 or something, because you're still competitive in their eyes. So this is a way that you can actually, it's a great way to penetrate new markets where you potentially haven't tried to sell, or you maybe tried to sell historically, but you got some resistance. So don't you know, for obvious reasons, never give up. But rather than target, you know, don't sell across, don't sell down, go up the way. Look at the challenger brands, look at the brand leaders, and start to try and have conversations with them, and just acknowledge, look, you know, Mr. Prospect, I appreciate there's a lot of turbulence in the market. I appreciate that all companies, especially in your industry, are potentially looking to drive efficiencies and savings. Could we have a conversation? Now, for me, that's a much better, smarter strategy and approach than just carrying on selling across the way and down the way, or even worse, saying, okay, guys, your average is 50 calls a day. You now need to make 60 calls a day to get the same targets. You know, that is a blunt instrument that is not going to, it's not going to be sustainable. So I'm sure you're going to get some quick wins like that. Absolutely. But in terms of our strategy, we need to think a little bit smarter, and I would suggest that you sell up. Now, before we actually make contact with these challengers and brand leaders, let's now move on to what I would suggest is a simple way that you can strategize before you actually talk to these bigger players in the market. And that's using what we call our Sales Battlecards. And again, if you've just joined late, this template is available via our website under the MS Word Sales Playbook under the Resources tab. So it's a really simple thing. It shouldn't take hours and hours to complete. Most companies and most people within the organization have got this information, but a lot of it is contained in their head. And what we're suggesting here is that let's commit that information, that sales intelligence, to paper so that we can share it with our colleagues on the front line and actually then start coaching them to this. So if you're a sales manager, this is absolutely for you. But if you're a salesperson and you're on that front line, you can absolutely use this the same strategy to make your life easier. So here is a simple example here, and what I've tried to do is to put some context into it so that it's easier to understand. But obviously, I've had to remove some of the names to protect the innocence, so to speak. This, however, is based on one of our own sales battle cards that we use in our business, and we get a lot of our clients who love the fact that we only teach what we use in our business. It's one of the main differentiators for us. So this is an example of where we're using this. So ABC Industries, you've just got the company details there, the competitor details, and then a little bit on the competitor background. You know, what's their history? What's their sweet spot? Where have they beaten you before, and what strategy did they use? And that then rolls into the next column here on the top. Third from the left is competitor sales strategy. How are they actually selling? So this particular competitor of our own typically only sell to large enterprise accounts. They deliver, the delivery is over what we call week-long or 2-week-long boot camps. Their style is what we would describe, I beg your pardon, as heavy on theory because it's classroom based. Now, I'm not here to knock them. That's their approach. They're very successful. I'm not here to knock them at all. However, how do we win, right, when we're selling against them? Well, if we know that's their strategy, we have to counter and challenge that. And one of the easiest ways to do this is we would reframe that and focus on what we call work-based learning. What is work-based learning? Well, 70% of learning is doing, not sitting in the classroom. 70% of learning is doing. Nobody learned how to make a cold call in a classroom. 70% of learning is doing. Nobody learned how to do a presentation in a boardroom in a classroom. Yes, those are starting points. They're good and valuable resources, but the real learning is when you actually get there and start to actually implement the stuff. If all of you think back to when you learned to drive a car, I think all of us would admit that whilst we maybe went for some lessons and we sat some form of exam at the end of the or driving test at the end of the lessons, you didn't really learn until you actually got out on your own and started driving on your own. Sales is just like that. You've got to actually learn on the job, and that's not to say that training doesn't and coaching isn't there to support you. It absolutely is. But 70% of learning is doing. There's no point just sitting in the classroom all day long, and our learning is focused on that. So it's what we call work-based learning. Again, to counter, they've got week-long delivery via boot camps. We do what we call agile delivery with module-based learning. So rather than delivering long courses, which leads on to the next point, the Ebbinghaus curve, 87% of what you're taught in any training session, you will forget within 28 days. So rather than do long training courses, we do 90-minute modules spread out, so they're bite-sized and they're much easier to consume, and then the individuals can take them away and implement them. So next up, focus on content, bespoke content. We don't do generic content, and we link learning to the business strategy. Now, this isn't about us. I'm just using this as an example. if you're in tech, let me just go back to the list I made. People who registered for the webinar were in tech, software, telco, finance, healthcare, oil and gas. You can do this. You just need the template, and all you do is fill in the gaps. So all I'm doing here is explaining how we use it in our world and giving you examples. It could be that you get companies who you compete against who selling price. So rather than wait until we've got somebody on the phone, rather than wait until we've got in the boardroom to talk to the C-suite, why don't we strategize and plan in advance how we're actually going to win? Marketing and companies in general spend an awful lot of money to get salespeople in front of a prospect. For us, the least that we can do from a sales perspective is to actually plan and prepare, right, before we go into that boardroom, before we pick up that phone, to maximize our chances. So, in terms of competitor sales strategy, you would put in there whatever the sales strategy was of your competitors. If those ones on the screen are relevant, absolutely keep them in there. If they're not relevant, swap them out for ones that are relevant. If you're not sure how to win, give us a call. We're more than happy to try and help you. So again, this is a simple pre-call strategy that you need to prepare so that you understand how to control the sales conversation and direct the sales conversation to the areas of your product or service where you are strongest, where you're most likely to have the advantage over your competitors. Moving down in terms of the product service, oftentimes we see people ignore number one, which is the status quo. So in many cases, big enterprises and even smaller companies, I would suggest, actually go to market to try and purchase something, but then they end up sometimes buying nothing because the change was just too difficult for them. So the companies, it's much easier for your customers to stay the same and do nothing. But what we've got to do is we've got to, as salespeople, we've got to make the risk of doing nothing bigger than the risk of whatever change we're going to introduce. Now, again, doesn't matter what sector you're in, it's the same thing. You must make the risk, because and risk is something that companies are very averse to. They don't like, right? Companies will put up with losing thousands of pounds, but it's the risk that risk and uncertainty that they won't put up with. So our suggestion would be that you need to make the risk of doing nothing greater than the risk of whatever the product or service that you're introducing to them is. And you've got to actually talk that through with them, because it's an absolute it's an absolute threat to the sale. In many cases, you're going to lose, and what you'll find is that the company, it wasn't your competitor, they just chose to do nothing. So there's some generic challenge questions there. How is this pain impacting your business, Mr. Prospect? How much is the pain costing the business? Why is this important to fix now? Those are generic questions. I'm sure you all know these, and they are what we would call top of the funnel, question funnel. You would obviously need to extrapolate from those. So number two is the actual service that we would use in this example, the service that we would propose to actually compete with this particular competitor. It's called OKR-based coaching versus what they're selling, which is CAM, key account management. And our challenge questions would be around how do salespeople learn, right? So it's not just, it's about learning via doing, which we've touched on. It's about, do salespeople really learn in the classroom? Salespeople are busy people. Salespeople have got a lot going on, and I think to ask any salesperson to sit in a classroom for even a full day, a full 8 hours, it's a big ask. It's not impossible, but it's a big ask, let alone anything like 2, 3, 4, 5 days. So how do people learn? How do people sell which is important for us because oftentimes this competitor is coming in with a new sales methodology. And I would argue, regardless of how good or bad that sales methodology is, that the majority of that methodology will not stick on a large workforce because they've probably been selling an average of 20 years. They've got their own way of selling, and to ask them to change completely into a new methodology is actually unrealistic, and in most cases, it's just never going to happen. So, simple example, at the moment, we're dealing with a company who are hugely successful, wanted to talk to us about sales training, wondered what new system we were going to bring, and we suggested, why would you want to change your system that you've got that has led to all your success so far? Why would you want to change that? Why would you not just want to bottle that and then share it amongst the rest of the team? Bottle the best practice, document, record the best practice, and then share it with the rest of the team. That's a much more efficient way. It's also making sure that the content is bespoke to the actual client. So cost of delivery, all these things come in. What's the cost of having 10 salespeople in a classroom for one day? Work out what if they're on an average of I don't know, 70,000 plus employers' national insurance, expenses, etc. That becomes an expensive one day to have them out in the field. So work out what these are. How relevant is generic content to the audience? Are experienced sales pros going to actually engage with some form of generic sales content? No, right? I would venture. And does the generic content actually link to the business strategy? If it's not linked to the strategy, surely it's not a learning priority. You need to be prioritizing what the learning needs are in line with the business strategy. So again, this is just a simple example of how you can use this in your world, and it will take a little bit of effort and a little bit of brain power to complete the boxes and make it bespoke, but hopefully it's a simple enough template that you're going to be able to copy. Next up is challenge sales stories. So we're great believers in having the courage and confidence to challenge the customer. However, despite what all the surveys say, I would argue that customers don't like to be challenged. They've got some sort of fixed idea in their head often, and just some sales guy coming in and telling them that's wrong, you need to be doing this. You've got to be a little bit more delicate about it. You've got to, I would suggest that you need to make it their idea, not your idea. We use a tool called micro stories. There's a template for that in the playbook. Again, we use a tool called micro stories, and they're a great way of seeding the conversation and actually getting the customer to understand that potentially there's other options that they need to potentially look at in terms of how they're going to solve the particular problem. You can see what's it. So Gartner, that's relating to some a survey. Values, how people sell is intrinsically linked to their values, and unless you're going to come up with a methodology that 100% fit with their values, they're never going to change and adopt it. So calculating the cost, obviously that refers to cost of delivery, and how relevant is generic content to an audience. You need to have your own little stories there, and those stories are, they've got to be based on previous case studies, previous clients that you've dealt with. They've got to, what I'm saying is they've got to be true. If you're a fake and a fraud and you're making it up, you'll very quickly get found out. So I would urge you at all times to speak the truth, even if you think it's going to hurt you. The truth will set you free. We're obviously great believers in the power of storytelling in the sale, and these stories should be committed to memory, and it's not something that you're going to say. You can't in the middle of a boardroom say, could you bear with me, Mr. Customer, I need to look up the story on values that's going to be relevant at this moment in time. You've got to put some effort into actually learning this stuff and committing it to memory. But the good news is the more you do it, the more contact you've got with prospects, the more times you're in the boardroom or on the telephone, the better you're going to get. And the idea of the sales battle card is to make sure that rather than trying to remember everything, you've got some visual prompts to guide you in terms of where you need to go, where you need to take that sales conversation. So we think the sales battle cards are great. Our customers have had a great deal of success, and I would urge you to look at using these in context with the previous conversation we had. You know, look at the wherever you are. You could be an SME and you're looking to upsell into that mid-market space. That's great. You could be a new entrant. There's absolutely no shame in that. We were all new entrants once, right? If you're new entrants, you're in the best position because you've got the biggest proportion of the market to go at. And in terms of that proportion, let's pretend you're an SME and you've got 10% market share. I would argue that the majority of that market share, that remaining market share, that 90%, the majority of that market share are paying more than what you're charging your customers. So let's be positive, right? Let's not be Mr. Doom and Gloom. Let's be positive, right? There's enough of a world out there. The internet, the great thing about lockdowns is it's made selling to companies who are maybe outside what was your traditional geographic territory. The great thing about lockdowns, it's made dealing with companies at distance much easier. Buyers are much more open to dealing with companies who are not necessarily on the doorstep. So there's lots and lots of things to be positive about, and whilst acknowledging that yes, there's inflation, yes, there's certain industries who are suffering, there's still more than enough of a market for us to go at. You know, if you think of your total addressable market as a pie, right, whatever percentage of the pie you've got, the remaining percentage of that pie is an opportunity. And we would, before you just go diving in, let's put some thought into it. Let's put a little bit of strategic thinking into it. Let's do some battle cards so we can structure the conversations so that when we do get in front of those potential new prospects, we're actually going to be putting our best foot forward, and we're going to hopefully be doing our best. So this is a short webinar today. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. If you're watching this recording via YouTube later, please, what's the word I'm looking for? Please like, follow, whatever it is you do on YouTube. We would love you to do that. And if you want to have a conversation, if you need some support in implementing any of this stuff, we would love to talk to you. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great week ahead of you. Thank you.